not on purpose. She granted quick and swift deaths for all who fell prey to her clutches. She wasn't born a killer, she was made into one. She was the most prolific hunter of humans in recorded history. She was the world's most deadly man-eater, and she was a tiger. Welcome to National Park After Dark.
We're doing another animal attack episode.
The animal attack episode. Yes, we are.
Worse than Night of the Grizzlies.
So much worse.
Oh god.
It's a long one, and it can be graphic. So this is your warning. Here it is. This episode, if you could not tell, is going to be about animals attacking people, people being consumed. It's rough. And if you are not feeling it right now, if you just ate, if you're about to eat, if you're eating currently, maybe you should wait. So just a fair warning right now. I do want to say that the primary source for the episode today came from a book called No Beast So Fierce by Dane Huckelbridge, and I read it cover to cover in one day, and it was so good. So good.
I was just gonna say, it had to have been if you read it all in one day.
I had plans of like, okay, I'm gonna spread this out throughout 3 days because, you know, while you're gathering research, you have to stop and take notes and revise things. It's not just sitting down and reading a book so you can reflect later and, you know, create an episode. I wish it was that easy, but yeah, it was so good I couldn't put it down. So if you like this episode and the concept of this episode and the story, there is so much more to be found in this book. I will link it in the show notes so you can take a look at that.
What park are we going to?
I'm intertwining the park as we go, so you'll see.
Okay.
But we are headed to India.
Ooh, we haven't gone there yet.
We haven't. And before we jumped into the story, I do want us to get acquainted with wild tigers so we can really understand our main character today. I know that kind of sounds silly because we all know what tigers are and have a good understanding of just how powerful and frightening they could be. But just to put it really in perspective, it's going to change how you view this episode and view the main character. Okay. Let's have a little tiger physiology lesson, shall we?
Yes, let's learn about some tigers.
We all know that they're big and can be very scary, but they are truly natural wonders. At one point, there were 9 subspecies of tiger, but 3 have gone extinct in recent history due to habitat loss and overhunting. And out of the 6 subspecies of tigers that remain today, what you're probably picturing right now is the Bengal. These tigers currently live in the forests of Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, and India, and are considered phantoms of the forest. Typically, tigers are shy, elusive, and pretty avoidant of people, and many people living in these areas have never actually even seen one in person, which, depending on who you ask, is probably a very good thing, because although they may be largely avoidant of people, it doesn't mean that's always the case. Bengal tigers are the subspecies responsible for the vast majority of the hundreds of thousands of deaths attributed to tiger attacks throughout history.
Hundreds of thousands of tiger attacks?
Yes.
Oh.
So now there are 2 categories of attacks, which we are familiar with based on our other animal episodes. And I was thinking about it today. So we now have lions and tigers and bears.
Oh my.
Oh my. And dingoes.
Yeah. We need some more. I love the animal episodes.
Me too.
Crocodiles.
You can do the crocodiles. Crocodiles freak me out way too much. Going back, we know that there are 2 categories of attacks. One is predatory and one is defensive. And when it comes to other animals, you may have a better shot at walking away depending on the type of attack launched on you. But with tigers, even a defensive swat or a bite may do you in. Tigers have 3 to 4 inch long canine teeth, the largest of any living feline species. They weigh an average of 400 to 700 pounds, and can reach speeds of 40 miles an hour during short sprints. They can leap 20 feet vertically, reach 30 feet in a single leap, and have a 1,000 pound per square inch bite force, which is stronger than a great white shark.
Whenever I hear stats like this, it just really puts me at the bottom of the food chain. I'm like, I have no chance. I'm like, my nails are 1 centimeter. My teeth have no sharpness at all. My canines have evolved out of me. I don't have, like, I'm toast.
Yeah, I would say evolutionarily wise, our biggest asset is our brains. That's what's kept us around this whole time. Otherwise, we totally would have been wiped off the face of the earth long ago. Tigers' typical prey of choice are ungulates, like deer or water buffalo, but they aren't picky, and they've been documented preying on things as small as squirrels, porcupines, water dwellers like 300-pound harbor seals and 15-foot-long crocodiles, other formidable carnivores such as bears and wolves, all the way up to elephants, topping in at over 5 tons and standing as large as a U-Haul.
Jesus.
Now, this is typical tigers with typical diets, but we aren't talking about a typical tiger. We are talking about the Champawat tiger. This tiger holds the record for the most humans killed by any single animal in recorded history. She held a several-year reign of terror and killed and consumed a reported 436 people, which left a mark on the communities of Nepal and India forever. Now that I'm getting older, I'm realizing how important it is to stay up with my health, and that includes my spinal health. As someone who enjoys working out, I know that my spinal health plays an important role in my overall musculoskeletal system. It's important that I keep it healthy, and that's why I love the Chirp wheel. The wheel puts pressure on my hard-to-reach back muscles surrounding my spine, the ones that are usually super tight.
Howdy all in the live. I'm just playing Pokemon Sapphire, and then I have a true crime podcast in the background. It's currently on ads, and I'm not the most fond of ads. I think they're kind of annoying, but it was somewhat exciting and kind of overwhelming when I first joined the live. There were suddenly like 200 people at once, and that was a lot to deal with. I was kind of like, my heart was racing, so it's a little bit more manageable with the 8 of y'all, so I don't mind. So I'm going to be doing this for like an hour to just unwind. I got back from work late because I closed the pizza place. So just trying to relax before my day. So yeah.
That she's eating. Well.
Oh, by the way, the podcast is about like a man-eating tiger.
So sit back and get comfy because this is a long one. People living in India and Nepal at the time of our story, which is the late 1800s to early 1900s, were no stranger to tigers. The relationship between tigers and humans have in this area is stretching back thousands of years. Going back to the Taru, the indigenous peoples of the Terai, which is a lowland region of northern India and southern Nepal, which lies at the foothills of the Himalayas, this group of people lived alongside tigers and held them in high regard. They have been found on apparel, emblems, and coins, and are passed down in stories through generations. Part of the Taru belief system viewed the animals as physical manifestations of the power and grace of the natural
There's 8
world.
right now.
And the natural world was of utmost importance to them, therefore the tiger was as well. To them, tigers were supreme and sacred and were used by the gods to convey messages and to guard their beloved forests. That's not to say that everything was peace and harmony. The Taru primarily passed information down through oral history, and because of that, there is little written historic record and documentation of the tiger attacks that happened on people, but we know that they did happen. The Taru believed that because tigers were the physical manifestation of that power and grace of the natural world, and who were usually guardians, if a tiger turned to man-eating, it was a sign from the gods, and a very bad sign. Predations happened and were taken very seriously. Tiger widows were shunned and isolated by the community, forced to go about daily routines and tasks only in certain scheduled hours of the day. They could only wear white saris and white accessories, and were considered very bad luck and unholy. Although predations were not unheard of, no one was prepared for the Champawat. It is thought that she began her reign in the early 1900s in the year of 1903 in the Terai of Nepal. This area is dense jungle, full of swamps, forests, and grasses towering 10 feet tall. It's not an easy place to develop, but it's prime tiger habitat. It's thought she was born here and spent her first couple years roaming its forests until a hunter's bullet changed the course of her life. She was shot, and the bullet shattered one of her most important survival tools, her teeth. Her upper and lower right canines were destroyed, one broken down to the bone and the other clean in half. Suddenly, she found herself at a huge hunting disadvantage. While her speed and long retractable claws may have helped her chase down and capture a 3,000-pound buffalo, without the full use of her teeth, she was in huge trouble. Plus, she was now in no place to defend her territory properly. Tigers are extremely territorial, and for most of their lives, solitary. With a damaged mouth, fighting to keep her territory would be extremely difficult. A typical territorial range can vary between 20 square miles to hundreds of square miles, depending on the subspecies of tiger we're talking about. And in the wild, the average lifespan of a tiger is about 12, mainly because older tigers are mauled by other tigers, which are often younger and in better shape, for the right to territory, which leads or forces many tigers to seek out other areas, many of which they are unwelcome.
Oh, that's kind of sad.
The natural world is full of sadness, and it's hard sometimes to keep that in mind. It's like, it's nature, it is what it is, it's been like that for thousands of years, it'll always be like that, but you can't help but to have empathy, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I just think of it as like, oh, but they're old, and it's their territory, and they're just...
I remember there was a movie, there's a movie that changed my life, and I can't even remember what it was called, but it's a documentary. I watched it in college. It's narrated by Jeremy Irons. I don't know, people are screaming at me right now. He was the voice of Scar in The Lion King.
Okay.
And it's about lions in Africa, and there's one scene in that documentary. You had been following this male lion throughout the entire film, and at the end he's old, he's battle scarred, and he has been pushed out of his pride, and he just got into a huge fight over territory with another male lion, and literally you just see him laying there on the open savanna, panting and in really rough shape, and then all of a sudden he just puts his head down and dies. Heart-shattering.
That's so sad.
I like films like that are kind of like, this is just how it is. But at the same time, I can't watch too many of them in a row because it's super depressing.
Yeah. Something about animals just hits you different, but at the same time, like, it is nature. And it's not a Disney movie.
Exactly.
Although Lion King was actually very traumatic, so that's a bad example. But
yeah, can we just take a moment for 1 second to reflect,
address on the trauma that we all endured as children?
That was, yeah, on another level. I don't think Disney movies do that anymore. Do they?
Oh no, I don't think so. But anyway, you're gonna traumatize us again with tigers this time.
The Taru lived in this environment of the Terai, but in very small and scattered numbers compared to the nearby villages. The village of Rupal is set up kind of like a bullseye.
Silly me.
If you look up Google
My phone
images
is
of
being
it.
whack as
So the center
bonkers,
is
as it were.
dense with homes and farms, and it's
I need to actually
encircled
invest in
by
a proper
layers
tripod.
of green hills
I've been,
and wooded ravines
making my
that
own.
lead into the surrounding jungle. And this was perfect for the Champawat. Villagers were constantly outside, working in the fields or in the forest itself, gathering firewood and supplies. And she would lurk in the edge of this forest, where the farmland met the woods, and would wait until the perfect moment. Victims would have never heard her or seen her coming, and she thrived here and was so successful that after 2 years, she had taken nearly 200 lives.
Wow. Were they doing anything about it?
Great question. They tried. So the people of RuPaul really did try to put an end to this, but time and time again, she was too quick, too elusive, and terrifying to confront. The way the village was constructed made it easy for her to take somebody and quickly drag them off and hide in one of the area's wooded ravines, making it extremely difficult to locate and to capture her. And accounts vary on exactly how it went down, but essentially the village sought outside help in the form of the Nepalese government. Because at this point, too many people were being killed, and it was clear that there was no signs of her stopping on her own or moving along to a different location.
This was her territory now.
Exactly. This was her new home territory and her new hunting grounds, and there was no reason for her to move on. There was no other tigers in the area pushing her out. The prey was easy. She had an injury that prohibited her from going after her natural prey. So for her, this is paradise. So why would she?
I mean, if she's getting 200 people, I mean, she's well fed at this point.
Exactly. So they came up with a tactic. Goats and water buffalo were tied to stakes and strung along the valley as bait to lure her in. The plan was to draw her in and then flush her out. Thousands of people convened in tiers. The first line, called the beaters, was made up of the villagers. They were armed with machetes, and their job was to clang them together, shout and scream as loud as they could in an effort to scare her. Behind them were a line of shikaris, hunters, who were mounted on top of elephants that were specifically trained for battle. And lastly were the Nepalese soldiers armed with rifles.
I didn't know that you could train elephants for battle, just to start.
Okay, well, just to
with that.
tell you, this book goes into great detail about the history of the Indian and Nepalese people using elephants for different tasks, and one of them is how they used to train them for war and for doing like logging and doing farm things, but also to go into battle, to not be afraid. And they would be like armed with spikes and they would trample people, and it was insane.
Wow, that is just a vision. Wow, that's interesting.
They were also used as a form of execution as well.
Death by elephant? What is that, like getting trampled?
Yeah.
That's putting elephants in such a sad light, because did you know that elephants can die from a broken heart?
I think you told me that during the Amazing Elephant episode. Amazing Animal Rescue episode.
Yeah, so they, like when they get their babies taken away from them and killed, or like their partner dies or something like that, they actually get so depressed and so upset that they stop eating and they stop drinking, and they'll die because they'll stop nourishing themselves and doing anything to survive anymore because they're so devastated. So I just think of them as animals that are put into war, and that's really sad when you know that about them.
Well, when you know that you're dealing with another sentient being, reflecting back on the horrific things that we've done to them in the past is really, really difficult to process. And I say the past, it happens literally all the time, and we're not even going to get into that because I'll get very upset and fired up. But it is interesting to read the history on it, and I don't know if they're used anymore in that capacity. I would certainly hope not, but you never know. I lost my place entirely. Okay, we're back. We're back to the village of RuPaul. We have our line of villagers, the Shikaris, and Nepalese army. And what they did is they formed a large U that surrounded the outskirts of the village, cutting off the animal from its favorite hiding spots in the ravines. And as they moved in, the two far ends of the line slowly started to move together to form kind of like a pincher. And at the same time, they were moving westward. It was the only way out of the valley, and it led to a river. So they were basically bottlenecking her to one specific area.
Okay.
As the group emerged from the brush and onto the riverbank, they saw a flash of orange and black leaping off the rocky shores and plunging into the river. They shot wildly at her, but all of their bullets missed their intended target. The tigers had eluded them once again. She swam across the river and pulled herself out unscathed on the other side. That other side happened to be another country. She was now in India, and with a new country came a new beginning and a new hunting ground.
So they drove her out.
And then they were kind of like, all right, India's problem now, bye.
They're like, okay, good luck, we got her out. Woo, party, okay, no one's getting eaten anymore. Sorry, India.
So while the Champawat was hunting humans and altering the way that they lived, humans were doing the same thing to tigers. Again, another fascinating and complex history on this subject as well, but how it changed over time is actually very important to this particular story. For centuries, hunting tigers in India was a very sacred practice, and beginning in the 1500s, formal royal hunting parties began. These hunts were reserved exclusively for royalty and royal party members only. They were rotated throughout various preserves and locations, having conservation in mind, not overhunting a particular area, and they were held in widely dispersed areas and were conducted only with bows and spears. So some hunts were never successful because of that.
Okay.
The local people were also at this time living in and managing the jungle and forest traditionally, but all of this began to change with the onset of colonialism. By the mid-1800s, the British officially had rule over the country, but in the centuries prior, their presence and influence had certainly left their mark. To vastly oversimplify, the British viewed the country basically as this vast, expansive wilderness that they could exploit, cut down, turn into farmland, and then tax and make money off of.
Story from around the world.
Literally.
I feel like it's the same everywhere, I guess.
What followed was, by today's standards, wildly irresponsible and destructive forestry tactics, hunting practices, and agricultural policies. The British first arrived with an intention to trade, but then after a lot of classic European shenanigans, essentially lots of battles, overthrowing local rule, and taking control of pretty much everything, European influence was popping up throughout the country, in everything from the language to the recreation activities and to the education system. And on the other side of the coin, the Indian culture was rubbing off on the British. And this kind of like melting of worlds gave birth to what was known as the colonial tiger hunt in the 1780s. To the British, hunting tigers was aligned with civilization and showed progress, air quote, air quote. And their mission was to civilize India. And their view was kind of like, how can we push civilization forward and construct schools and run farms with tigers around?
Right. It's like, we're going to move on to their territory and rip it down, and also they can't live here anymore because they're disrupting us.
Essentially. And plus, they were probably scared shitless. Because for example, in 1769, tigers claimed over 400 people, and in the 1790s, another 700 people every single year were being killed by tigers in the state of Bengal alone, which is a very frightening statistic, but death by tiger actually wasn't too abnormal, and it didn't even top the charts. During this time period, reports indicate that 20 to 25,000 people lost their lives in India every single year by animal. And tigers were to blame for about 1,000 of those deaths. So considering that's 1,000 out of 300 million, which was the population of India during that time at the end of the 1800s, that's actually quite low, statistically wise. But that was about 1,000 too many deaths for the Europeans. And they were a huge driving force behind a government bounty program. And between the years of 1875 and 1925, over 80,000 tigers were reported killed for government bounties alone.
80,000?
And those were just for government bounties and just the ones that were reported.
And tigers are endangered now, right?
Oh, we're going to get into that. Yes, they are. Also, what was once set aside only as a royal privilege, those royal tiger hunts, those hunts were becoming very commonplace. In the 19th century, tiger hunts were rampant across the country of India. Thousands of animals were being slaughtered by Europeans, and individual hunters were stepping forward, very proudly boasting their numbers. And it was not uncommon for a single hunter to kill up to 400 animals.
That's ridiculous. What's the purpose of that? Are they eating them? Are they using them? Or this is all trophy hunting and this is all...
I don't even think at this point it's considered trophy hunting. It's because it's kind of like the bounty for wolves in North America. You know, the United States government put a bounty on wolves because wolves were in direct competition with farmers. But you're not giving the wolves a chance, or in this case tigers, because you're cutting down their habitat and reducing their habitat. You're driving away their natural prey, putting other prey animals onto the land that they were once on, and expecting them not to eat them. So essentially they're like, well, you have to go. So the government was paying people to go out and kill as many of the predators as they could so that they could bulldoze everything, develop the land for agriculture, and make money off of that.
That's really, really sad. And essentially just killing thousands of animals because they're a nuisance to what you want.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's not even the traditional way of life for the people of India and Nepal at this time. So not only are they changing the habitat for animals, there's an entire different discussion about how this impacted culture in these countries as well.
Yeah.
So a full century of unchecked slaughter, coupled with the ecological mismanagement, which, like we just kind of touched upon, fragmented and decimated tiger habitat and decreased prey population densities, put the Champawat in a unique and impossible situation. With less and less wild places to turn and a debilitating injury, the hunting of humans continued. With 200 Nepalese victims already claimed, the killing didn't stop now that the tigress was now in India. She began almost immediately, snatching people in much the same way she did in Nepal. Word was spreading like wildfire. Everyone was talking about the tiger that was claiming so many victims. And that is how a young man If you are an avid National Park After Dark listener, you definitely know how much we love Prose, the world's most personalized hair care. And those of you who haven't, I'm going to tell you about my results. Since Prose came into my life, I have definitely seen a huge improvement in the softness of my hair, which historically has been difficult to tame. I absolutely love the hair mask, probably the most, just because it gives me a very rich, deep condition that leaves my hair super soft. And Prose knows that there is more to you than just your hair type. Prose has given over 1 million consultations with their in-depth hair quiz, and that's how I got started. The quiz asks you a lot of unexpected questions at first, but then after you start answering them, it starts to click that all of this information should be used to determine what you need in a hair care regimen. Prose asked me what my diet was, and it makes sense that your diet would affect your hair. So I'm really glad that that was incorporated in that quiz. By analyzing this, as well as over 85 personal factors, Prose determines a unique blend of ingredients to treat your exact hair needs. And they also have an awesome review and refine feature that lets me make small changes and tweaks to my formula as needed. If I suddenly decide to dye my hair platinum blonde, or I moved and the environment is different than where I am now. All of those things Prose takes into consideration. And as a carbon neutral certified B Corp, Prose is an industry leader in clean and responsible beauty, which is very important to Cassie and I. And all of their ingredients are sustainably sourced and ethically gathered and cruelty free. If you're not 100% positive that Prose is the best hair care you've had, they'll take the products back with no questions asked. Prose is a healthy hair regimen with your name all over it. Take your free in-depth hair consultation and get 15% off your first order today. Go to prose.com/NPAD. That's PROSE.com/NPAD for your free in-depth hair consultation and get 15% off. Edward James Corbett, known as Jim, was of Irish descent, born into a British family, and was raised in India. He was in his 20s in 1903 working on the railroads when he first heard of the Champawat. He was an excellent hunter and known as one of the best shots around. He learned young, as one of 15 children, hunting was not just sport, but a way to put food on the table. He had experiences with tigers in India, growing up there and in their habitat. But as an adult, unlike many other Europeans in India at the time, he had a different view of tigers. Rather than animals to be killed, he viewed them as animals of importance. In 1907, 4 years after Jim Corbett first heard of the Champawat, he was asked to help. Several attempts by the best of the best hunters and trackers of the time to dispatch the tigress had taken place, and every single one of them had failed. She continued her kill streak. At the time he was enlisted to help, she had killed a staggering 434 people.
Wow. So they're like, we gotta get her out now. She's literally killing everybody. And this number is including from the other country, too, what she was in.
Yeah, so about 200 people in Nepal, and now that she's in India, she's added on to that number. And you have to realize this is going on for years. This has been years.
Yeah.
So at this point, they're in a very bad situation and they need help. It's clear that she's outsmarting all of the best people enlisted to help, and Jim, like I said, was known as a really good shot, and he knows the area well because he's in a unique position because he is of European descent, but he was born and raised in India, so he knows this area quite well. But if you think about it, like, why Jim, like, or really any white guy? We talked a little about how the people of India have been coexisting with tigers for many, many years, and they had faced man-eaters before and handled these conflicts on their own before. So why was this different? And the answer to that is partially because after some colonial and Indian conflicts and uprisings, in the 1850s, most segments of India's society was banned from having guns or weapons of any kind without difficult hurdles to negotiate and hoops to jump through to obtain permits, which left the vast majority of villagers unarmed and unprepared. So this fact, plus the fact that at this point, a lot of years have passed with European influence, and by this time, a lot of the traditional knowledge of killing man-eaters had been lost through the generations. So they're screwed at this point. The people are in a really different situation compared to generations prior. It kind of reminds me of the Hawaii episode with the lost language and suppressing knowledge and traditions through generations.
It's kind of come full circle now. Like, they've kind of been messing up things for so long that there's no good resolution to how they used to deal with it anymore.
So like I mentioned, Jim was European born and raised in India, which was unique at the time, and it put him in a unique position because rather than seeing him as an outsider, the people of India were his friends. He worked with them, he grew up with them, he respected them, they respected him, which was unlike a lot of other relationships between Europeans and Indians at the time. And although he wasn't a traditional trophy hunter, he knew how to hunt and he was good at it, but he wasn't like those bounty hunters or anything like that. So at first he was reluctant, but India was his home and these were his people and this tiger was slaughtering them. So he agreed to help. Less than a week after agreeing to the hunt, the Champawat struck again. A young woman had been taken in the village of Pauli, 60 miles away. Jim and the 6 men he recruited for the expedition set off. That first day, they covered 17 miles, the next day, nearly 30. And on the third day, May 3rd, 1907, the men completed the final stretch to the village. When they first arrived, they arrived to a ghost town. Normally, customary greetings would take place, offerings of tea and food would be given to them, children would be running around the village, doing their daily activities, but they weren't greeted by a single person. After sitting down and making a fire, they heard the first sound of movement from within the huts. Eyes peeped out precariously from behind cracked doors. One by one, villagers emerged from their homes, and for the first time, Jim was face to face with real, shaken, and terrorized victims. These villagers were scared for their lives in all senses of the word. They had locked themselves in their homes for days on end, leaving for no reason whatsoever, not even to relieve themselves or to restock on food. They were gaunt, their eyes were sunken in, but wide with fear. The tiger was prowling the village, they said, and she could be heard roaring throughout the night. And in the book, the author describes that when Jim and his party came into the village, the first two things that struck them were the absence of people, but also the smell, because everyone was so scared to leave their homes that they were just urinating and defecating in their homes for days and days and days on end.
So these people were so terrified, they literally weren't stepping outside their house to go to the bathroom.
Right.
I mean, I can understand why. They've lost 200 people.
There's just such a fear. And especially when you're hearing her, like you can't see her, but you can hear her. Like that, I cannot even imagine what that's like.
And I imagine just these people who are disappearing and being taken from her, it's not like there's this bloody, horrible mess behind. It's like she takes them and they're gone, and they just never see them again.
Yep. So Jim wanted to be led to her most recent kill site, but soon discovered that that was not going to happen. Everyone was way too fearful, but they did describe what had happened. A group of women were collecting leaves on the outskirts of the village. One woman had climbed up a tree and was on her way down when the tiger pounced and ripped her from it, snatching her by the throat and running off with her so quickly, the rest of the women were stunned. They hightailed it back to get help, but when the enraged villagers came back, they found the woman actively being consumed by the tiger. No amount of shouting or rock throwing deterred her, and she defended her kill, scaring away any further attempts.
Was she still alive?
No.
Wow.
Despite hearing this, that first night, Jim did something extremely stupid. He set out outside the boundaries of the village, alone, in the middle of the night, in hopes of luring the tiger in and killing it. Something that he writes later, he immediately regretted. As soon as he sat down against the tree, he was bathed in the light of the moon, and he said the shadows were coming alive, and that every movement and sound and rustle and trick of the eye, he thought the tiger was coming to kill him. The next day, the villagers asked if he would stand watch over the fields while they hurriedly gathered food, which they had been way too scared to do for days. He agreed, and after the village was scoured for fresh tracks and none were found, the day was spent harvesting crops. Again, that next night, he asked to be brought to the kill site, and again, the villagers refused. For Jim, this was very frustrating, because tigers usually remain by their kill sites for a handful of days before moving on. So if he could locate this kill site, he could locate the tiger. With no guidance from the locals, he gave up for that day, barricaded himself in the hut, and spent his second night inside the village. The following day, Jim convinced 3 members of the village to show him where the mountain goats were located. It was clear that the village needed some food and a huge morale boost. An excellent marksman, he was able to kill 3 of the animals, and the entire village had a surge of hope and confidence. And it was because of this that they finally agreed to take him to the kill site. Jim had never hunted a man-eater, and this fact is important. Man-eating predators have variations in their behavior. They act differently than a typical tiger. One of these ways is that they're vastly more defensive of their kill sites. Usually, you can scare them away for a brief amount of time, but tigers who predate on humans are way more defensive of their kill sites.
Well, like you said, some of her teeth aren't there anymore. She has way less ability to get a kill. So if she has one, she doesn't know when she's going to get another one.
Exactly.
Ooh, I'm sorry, y'all, but my phone is about to die. Thank y'all for participating in my live so far. Like, I appreciate y'all. I hope y'all have a good morning / night / whatever it is for your time zone.